The pounding hit Jasmine before the lock gave way. "Baby, I know you're in there." Marcus's voice came through the bathroom door, deceptively soft, the kind of soft that always came before the storm. Jasmine pressed her back against the cold tile wall, her phone clutched in both trembling hands, her heart hammering so hard she thought he might hear it through the wood. The apartment's thin walls had never felt thinner. She could hear his breathing measured, controlled, patient. That patience terrified her more than the shouting ever had. "You really thought you could hide money from me? You really thought you could leave?" She pulled up her messages with shaking fingers, finding Mrs. Chen's contact, the neighbor 2 doors down, who'd whispered, "If you ever need help, just text me 3 weeks ago in the laundry room." Jasmine's vision blurred as she typed, "He's at my door. I'm hiding in the bathroom. Please hurry. I'm scared he'll kill me this time." Apt 3C. Her thumb hit send just as something heavy slammed against the door frame. Open. This. Door. The calm was gone now. This was the Marcus she knew. Detective Marcus Webb. Badge. Gun. The man no one would ever believe she needed protection from. "Girl, you're so lucky," her coworkers used to say. "A cop boyfriend? You'll always be safe." The door shuddered under another impact. Jasmine clutched her phone, waiting for Mrs. Chen's reply, praying for those 3 little dots that meant someone, anyone, was listening. The screen lit up. Her blood went cold. Unknown number. Jasmine's breath caught in her throat, but she didn't scream. She'd learned long ago that screaming only made him angrier. She pulled her knees tighter to her chest, making herself small, making herself nothing, just like she'd done 100 times before in 100 different rooms. The bathroom light flickered. The lock wouldn't hold much longer. That's when the silence came. Not the terrible silence before Marcus struck. This was different. The pounding stopped. His voice cut off mid-threat. And then she heard it. Footsteps. New footsteps. Multiple sets. Heavy boots on her apartment's cheap hardwood floor. Voices speaking low and fast in a language that definitely wasn't English. Korean. The entire apartment seemed to hold its breath. Even Marcus had gone quiet. Through the crack under the bathroom door, Jasmine saw shadows move across the light, sharp, precise movements that didn't match Marcus's cop swagger. These were different. These were predators. She heard a voice, male, cold as winter, speaking in accented English with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to be loud. "Detective Webb. Step away from the door." The air pressure in the apartment changed. Everything felt heavier, thicker, like the moment before lightning strikes. Jasmine's fingers were still wrapped around her phone, her mistyped message glowing on the screen. She'd sent her address, her apartment number, her desperate plea to a complete stranger. And that stranger had answered. From the other side of the door, she heard Marcus's voice, tight with something she'd never heard from him before. Uncertainty. "Who the hell are you?" Someone who received a very interesting text message. The voice was closer now, controlled, surgical. The kind of voice that didn't need to threaten because the threat was woven into every syllable. Through the crack under the door, Jasmine could see more shadows, now 4, maybe 5 figures, all dressed in what looked like tactical gear, moving through her tiny apartment like they owned it. Like Marcus was the intruder, not them. "This is a domestic situation. I'm a police officer and I know exactly who you are." The cold voice cut through Marcus's bluster like a blade through silk. "I also know what you were about to do. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave, now, and you're never coming back." The whole building seemed to go still. Jasmine heard Marcus start to say something probably about his badge, about authority, about how he was the law. But the words died in his throat. Whatever he saw in that man's eyes, whatever unspoken promise was delivered in that moment, it made Detective Marcus Webb, the man who'd terrorized Jasmine for 2 years, back down. Footsteps retreated. The front door opened, closed. Silence, Then a knock on the bathroom door. Not pounding, not demanding, just 3 soft taps. Miss Taylor. That same cold voice, but somehow gentler. You can come out now. Huh. Jasmine's hands shook as she reached for the lock. She had no idea who was on the other side of this door. The message on her phone screen still glowed. Unknown number. She'd accidentally texted a stranger her address, her apartment number, her moment of absolute terror. And that stranger had come. With an army. She turned the lock. The door swung open, and Jasmine found herself staring at a man who looked like he'd walked out of a tactical operation, dark vest, over a fitted black shirt, fingerless gloves, hair styled back with military precision, Korean features, sharp enough to cut glass, eyes that reflected no warmth but somehow didn't seem cruel. Behind him, 4 more men in similar gear had positioned themselves throughout her small apartment, checking exits, securing the space like they were protecting a head of state, not a waitress in a rundown complex. The man in front studied her with those cold, calculating eyes taking in her tear-streaked face, her uniform from the Soul Lounge still on because she'd come straight home after her shift, the defensive way she'd curled into herself. His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his gaze, recognition of a familiar wound, maybe. He held up his phone, her message displayed on the screen. He's at my door. I'm hiding in the bathroom. Please hurry. I'm scared he'll kill me this time. He read it without inflection, then looked back at her. You sent this to my number. A mistake, I assume. Jasmine could only nod, her voice trapped somewhere in her chest. He lowered the phone, his gaze never leaving hers. I'm Kang Min-jun, he said it, like she should know the name. Like everyone should. And since I'm already here. A pause, heavy with unspoken meaning. We should talk about what happens next. Behind him, one of his men spoke quickly in Korean. Min-jun responded without looking away from Jasmine, his tone decisive. The man nodded and left, presumably to secure the building's perimeter. These weren't police. These weren't security guards. These were something else entirely, something dangerous, and they'd come because she'd typed one wrong number. Jasmine's entire body was still shaking, adrenaline and terror and confusion making it hard to think. But one thought cut through the chaos with perfect clarity. She'd just traded one kind of danger for another. The question was, which one would destroy her first? Before we continue with Jasmine's story, if you're new here, welcome to a channel that brings you intense romance stories where danger and love collide, where powerful men become unlikely protectors, and where one wrong text message can change everything. If that sounds like your kind of story, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss an upload. Now, let's find out what happens when a desperate woman accidentally texts the most dangerous man in Atlanta. Min-jun was still waiting for her answer when the memories hit Jasmine like a wave. Standing in her broken apartment, surrounded by armed strangers, she couldn't help but remember the last time a man had promised to protect her. 2 years earlier, Jasmine Taylor had been someone else entirely. She'd stood in the kitchen of Constellation, one of Atlanta's premier farm-to-table restaurants, her chef's whites pristine, her natural afro pulled back in a silk scarf, plating a butternut squash risotto with the kind of precision that made Chef Laurent nod his approval. At 27, she was 6 months from finishing culinary school, working the line 4 nights a week, and dreaming of opening her own place someday. A neighborhood bistro, maybe. Somewhere that felt like home. That was the night Marcus Webb walked into her life. He'd been seated in her section during her brief stint helping front of house. Tall, broad-shouldered, with warm brown skin and a smile that could melt butter. When he'd asked what she recommended, she'd lit up talking about the bourbon-glazed pork belly, and he'd ordered it without looking at the price. Later, he'd waited by the host's stand until her shift ended. I'm Marcus, he'd said, offering his hand. Detective Marcus Webb. And I know this is forward, but I'd regret it if I didn't ask for your number. A detective, handsome, employed, polite. Keisha had squealed when Jasmine told her, "Girl, you better lock that down." The courtship had been a whirlwind. Flowers delivered to the restaurant, surprise picnic dates in Piedmont Park. He'd shown up at her culinary school graduation with her whole family, her mother, her aunt, her cousins, charming every single one of them. "This one's a keeper," her mama had whispered, squeezing Jasmine's hand. The red flags had been so small at first. "Where are you?" he'd text in the middle of her shift, not controlling, just concerned. "I worry about you walking to your car alone. Your friend Keisha seems kind of flaky," he'd mention after meeting her. "I just don't want her influencing you. You look beautiful. But maybe the dress is a little short?" Phrased as a compliment, edged with criticism. By the time Jasmine moved into his apartment 8 months later, the trap had already closed. She just didn't know it yet. She'd quit 2 of her shifts at Constellation because Marcus said she was working too hard, that he made enough for both of them. She'd stopped going to her monthly dinners with Keisha because he always had something planned those nights. She'd started dressing differently, talking differently, second-guessing her own thoughts. And she'd told herself it was love. Standing in her bathroom 2 years later, looking at the Korean gangster who'd just saved her life, Jasmine finally understood the truth. Marcus had never protected her. He'd owned her. The question was, what did Kang Min-jun want to do? The transformation had been so gradual that Jasmine hadn't noticed until it was too late. 3 months after moving in, Marcus had casually mentioned that her culinary program was a lot of stress for her. "You're always exhausted, baby. I make good money. You don't need to push yourself so hard." When she'd protested, he'd held her close and whispered, "I just want to take care of you. Is that so wrong?" She'd withdrawn from classes the following week. Then came the tracking. She'd find him waiting outside Constellation before her shift ended, claiming he happened to be in the area. Her phone started doing strange things, battery draining faster, apps she didn't remember downloading. When she'd mentioned it, he'd offered to fix it for her. She hadn't made the connection until much later. Detective Marcus Webb had access to surveillance tools most people didn't know existed. Her friends stopped calling after he'd answered her phone 1 too many times with thinly veiled hostility. Her family grew distant after he'd monopolized every visit, steering conversations, answering questions meant for her. Keisha had tried to reach out, but Marcus had deleted the messages before Jasmine saw them. By the time the first blow came, 15 months in, Jasmine had no one left. She'd burned dinner. Something stupid, meaningless. The chicken had been dry. His open palm had caught her across the face before she'd even registered his anger, the force snapping her head sideways. The shock had hurt worse than the pain. Then he'd crumbled, dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face, begging her forgiveness. "I don't know what happened. I'm so sorry. God, Jasmine, I'm so sorry. It'll never happen again." Never. She'd believed him. It happened again 2 weeks later, then again. Then it stopped being open palms and became fists. The apologies grew shorter. The justifications grew longer. "You made me," became his favorite phrase. "You know how I get," when "you" became her constant fear. She tried to leave twice. The first time, she'd made it to Keisha's apartment. Marcus had found her within 3 hours, badge in hand, charm activated, convincing Keisha it was all a misunderstanding. The second time, she'd gone to her mother's house. He'd shown up in uniform, playing the concerned boyfriend, subtly implying Jasmine was having a mental health crisis. "She's been so stressed lately. I'm worried about her." Afterward, he'd driven her back to the apartment in silence. Only when they were inside, door locked, did he lean close and whisper, "No one will ever believe you over me. I'm a decorated detective. You're an unemployed dropout. Remember that." She'd started to believe she deserved it, that she was difficult, ungrateful, broken, that this was all she'd ever get. So she'd found work at a diner, the Soul Lounge, with its upscale Korean fusion menu that reminded her of dreams she'd abandoned. She worked double shifts, sometimes triples, anything to avoid being home. The tips were good. The bruises were easy to hide under long sleeves, and every night she'd pray he'd be asleep when she got back. The night everything changed. The envelope had been her mistake. Jasmine had been saving for 6 months small bills, skimmed from her tips, deposited at a bank branch across town during her lunch breaks. $3,000. Not enough to disappear, but enough to start, enough to matter. She'd been so careful, keeping the account statements at work, never mentioning it, barely letting herself hope. But she'd forgotten about the overdraft notice from her old account, the one Marcus monitored, the one that showed a transfer she'd made to close it out, rerouting the final $63 to her secret escape fund. The envelope had arrived that afternoon. Marcus had been waiting when she got home from her dinner shift at the Soul Lounge, still in her server's uniform with the white-trimmed collar. He'd been sitting in the dark, the unopened envelope on the coffee table in front of him, his service weapon placed deliberately beside it. "What's this?" His voice had been terrifyingly calm. She'd known immediately. The room had tilted. "Marcus, I can explain. You can explain why you've been stealing from me?" He'd stood, slow and controlled. Hiding money? Planning to leave? "It's not like that." The slap had come faster than she'd expected, hard enough to split her lip. She'd tasted copper. Then his hands were on her, shoving her against the wall, his face inches from hers. "You ungrateful bitch! After everything I've done for you, everything I've given you." "Please." She'd tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, fingers digging into her arms hard enough to bruise. "You think you can leave me?" His voice had dropped to that dangerous whisper she knew too well. "You think anyone else would want you? You're nothing without me." The violence had escalated quickly after that. A shove that sent her stumbling over the coffee table. A kick when she tried to crawl away, his hands around her throat, squeezing, his eyes empty of everything except rage. For the first time in 2 years, Jasmine had looked into Marcus Webb's face and seen her own death reflected back. She'd fought, clawed at his arms, connected with something his eye, maybe hard enough to make him release her. Then she'd run 5 steps to the bathroom, slammed the door, turned the lock with shaking hands. That's when the pounding had started. And that's when she'd pulled out her phone, vision blurred with tears and terror, and tried to text Keisha, tried to send the message that would save her life. Her trembling fingers had betrayed her. The wrong number had answered. And now Jasmine stood in that same bathroom, the door finally open, staring at a man who'd brought an army to save a stranger. Kang Min-jun's dark eyes held no judgment. No pity, only a cold assessment that somehow felt more honest than any kindness. "We should talk," he repeated, his accented voice cutting through her shock. "About what happens next." The gangster at the door. Jasmine stepped fully out of the bathroom, her legs unsteady, and that's when she saw him. Marcus was on the floor near the overturned coffee table, conscious but subdued, one of Min-jun's men keeping him there with nothing more than a knee pressed against his spine and a hand on his shoulder. His face was bloodied, nose broken, maybe, lips split, and his eyes held something Jasmine had never seen in them before: fear. Not the controlled anger he used to intimidate her, but genuine, animal fear. He'd hit the ground hard. These men had made sure of it. Min-jun stood in the center of her small living room like he'd been born there, completely at ease despite the chaos. He glanced at his phone once more, then looked at Jasmine with those impossibly calm eyes. "He's at my door. I'm hiding in the bathroom. Please hurry." "I'm scared he'll kill me this time." He read her message aloud, each word deliberate. "You sent this to my number. A mistake. Not a question. A statement." Jasmine's throat was too tight to speak. She managed a nod. "But since I'm already here," Min-jun continued, pocketing his phone, "we should discuss your options. He gestured casually toward Marcus. Option 1, I leave. He stays. You go back to hiding in bathrooms and hoping he doesn't kill you next time. A pause. Option 2, you accept my help. I don't. Jasmine's voice cracked. I don't understand. Minjun's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, calculation maybe, or cold amusement. It's simple, Miss Taylor. Detective Webb here has been informed that you're under new management. You're my girlfriend now. He said it like he was discussing a business transaction. A very protective boyfriend. Marcus tried to surge up at that, rage overwhelming his fear. You can't just... The man holding him pressed down harder, and Marcus's words cut off with a grunt of pain. Minjun didn't even glance at him. I can, Minjun said quietly. And I will. He finally looked at Marcus, and the temperature in the room dropped. You're going to leave now, Detective. You're going to forget this address, forget her name, forget she ever existed. Because if I hear you've come within 100 feet of her again, if I hear you've so much as texted her what happened to your face tonight will seem like a kindness. The threat hung in the air, absolute and terrifying. Marcus was hauled to his feet, his badge and weapon confiscated and placed on Jasmine's kitchen counter. He looked at her one last time, humiliation and fury warring in his expression. But whatever he saw in her face or in the armed men surrounding her made him swallow his words. They escorted him out. The apartment door closed. Silence. Jasmine stood frozen, her entire world tilted on its axis. She'd just been claimed by a man she didn't know. A criminal. A gangster who'd appeared out of nowhere with enough power to make a cop bleed and beg. I know this is overwhelming, Minjun said, his tone almost gentle. But you're safe now, that's what matters. Jasmine wasn't sure she believed him, but she was too broken to refuse. Protected by danger. The apartment Minjun moved her to wasn't just secure, it was a fortress disguised as luxury. 23rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Atlanta's skyline, furniture that looked like it belonged in a design magazine. The building's concierge had arms like tree trunks and a telltale bulge under his blazer. The maintenance man who'd helped carry her meager belongings spoke into his sleeve in Korean. The night doorman moved like someone trained in combat. Guards, all of them. You'll be safe here, Minjun had said that first night, handing her a keycard. No one gets past the lobby without clearance. No one gets to this floor without my approval. Then he'd left her alone. For the first time in 2 years, Jasmine had slept through the night. No footsteps in the hallway, no door handle turning, no rage waiting to explode. She'd woken at 6 a.m., in a bed that wasn't hers, in an apartment paid for by a criminal, and cried from sheer relief. Minjun visited every evening. He'd arrive around 7, always knocking first, always waiting for her permission to enter. He brought food, expensive takeout from restaurants she recognized from her Constellation days, Korean dishes from the Seoul Lounge that made her throat tight with memories. He'd set the containers on her kitchen counter and ask about her day like they were friends, like this arrangement was normal. Did you sleep well? Do you need anything? Are the accommodations satisfactory? His courtesy confused her more than his violence had. Marcus had been charming before the mask slipped. Every polite gesture from Minjun felt like a trap waiting to spring. But weeks passed, and the trap never closed. She'd overhear conversations when his men visited clipped Korean, punctuated by English words she understood. Shipment, territory. The Colombians are pushing back. Once, she'd heard Minjun on the phone, his voice cold as winter. Handle the problem. I don't care how. She'd realized then, truly realized, what he was. Not just dangerous, not just powerful. Kang Minjun was the head of a criminal empire, and she was living under his protection like some kind of what? Mistress? Asset? Pet project? Yet he'd never raised his voice to her. Never touched her without asking first, even that first night, when his hand had brushed her shoulder to guide her out of her old apartment, He'd pulled back at her flinch and kept his distance after. He spoke to her like she mattered, like her opinions had weight, like she was a person instead of a possession. It was the opposite of everything Marcus had been. One night, 3 weeks in, Minjun had brought her favorite dessert honey butter bread from a Korean bakery. She'd mentioned it once, casually, and he'd remembered. "Thank you," she'd whispered, and meant it. He'd smiled barely, just a ghost of warmth. "You're welcome, Jasmine." And slowly, carefully, against every instinct screaming that this was dangerous, she began to trust the gangster at her door. Seeing each other, the conversation started on a Tuesday night after Minjun brought japchae from the Seoul Lounge. "You worked there," he said, not quite a question. "Before." Jasmine had nodded, watching him set the glass noodles on her counter. "I was saving money to go back to culinary school." "Before Marcus." She'd stopped, the words catching in her throat. "Before he made you afraid," Minjun finished quietly. She'd looked up, startled by his understanding. "I used to love cooking, creating something beautiful from nothing. Now I can't even look at a knife without." Her hands had trembled just thinking about it. Minjun had been silent for a long moment. Then, "My father used to say fear is a tool. He taught me to use it against others." A pause. "He never taught me how to let it go." That had been the beginning. Night after night, they'd talked. Not about Marcus, not about the syndicate, but about the people they'd been before violence had shaped them. Jasmine told him about her dreams, the neighborhood bistro, the community she'd wanted to feed, the joy she'd found in a perfectly balanced sauce. He listened like her words mattered, like her abandoned dreams deserved mourning. Minjun told her about inheriting the jade serpent at 25, still grieving his father, drowning in expectations he'd never asked for. "Everyone sees the power," he'd said one night, his usual coldness cracked just enough to show the exhaustion beneath. "No one sees the cage. Is that why you helped me?" Jasmine had asked. "Because you understand cages?" He'd looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted behind his eyes. "I almost didn't come. The text could have been anything, a prank, a trap, someone else's problem." He'd turned toward the window, Atlanta's lights stretching below them. "But my mother sent messages like that once, to neighbors, to friends, anyone who might listen. My father." His jaw had tightened. He was a powerful man. No one came. The silence had been heavy with understanding. "She escaped eventually," Minjun continued. "Took me with her. But those years when she was trapped," he'd looked back at Jasmine. "I heard your fear in that text. I couldn't ignore it." They were both survivors of different kinds of violence. His inherited, hers inflicted. Both carrying scars that didn't show on skin. "Thank you," Jasmine had whispered, "for coming." "Thank you," he'd replied, "for letting me stay." Something had shifted between them that night. Not love, not yet, but recognition. Two people who understood what it meant to be caged, finding unexpected freedom in each other's company. Neither of them knew that across the city, Marcus Webb sat in his car outside the police station, staring at surveillance photos of Minjun's building. His face was still bruised, his pride shattered, his badge hanging by a thread after inconsistencies in his reports. But he had connections, resources, and a burning need for revenge. He would find out who Kang Minjun was, and then he'd take back what belonged to him. The trap. Marcus had spent 6 weeks building his case, and it was beautiful in its cruelty. The Jade Serpent Syndicate. Korean organized crime. Money laundering, racketeering. Suspected connections to weapons trafficking. Federal agents had been watching Kang Minjun for 2 years, waiting for the right opportunity to move. Marcus had given them that opportunity, gift-wrapped with fabricated evidence linking the syndicate to a recent shipment of illegal firearms. All he needed was a credible witness to place Minjun at the scene of a crime. Someone vulnerable, someone with motive to lie, someone like Jasmine Taylor. She'd started working lunch shifts at the Seoul Lounge again, Minjun's suggestion, part of her healing process. The routine helped, he'd said. The familiar environment. She'd been grateful, not realizing she was being placed exactly where Marcus needed her. He walked into the restaurant at 2 p.m., badge visible on his belt, flanked by 2 federal agents in crisp suits. The lunch rush was winding down, but enough patrons remained to serve as witnesses. Perfect. Jasmine had frozen when she saw him, her serving tray nearly slipping from her hands. Jasmine Taylor? One of the agents spoke first, formal and loud enough to carry. We need to ask you some questions about Kang Min-jun. The restaurant went quiet. Every eye turned toward her. Marcus stepped forward, his expression a careful mask of professional concern. It's okay, Jasmine. We know you've been coerced. We know he's been threatening you. His voice carried that same gentle authority he'd used to fool her family. You're safe now. Just tell them the truth. Her mouth went dry. This was a performance, choreographed to trap her. The senior agent opened a folder, displaying photographs Min-jun entering warehouses, meeting with known criminals, images that looked damning even without context. Miss Taylor, we have evidence that Mr. Kang has been holding you against your will in an apartment he owns. We also have reason to believe he forced you to witness criminal activities. That's not, Jasmine started. But Marcus cut her off. I know you're scared. He moved closer, his voice dropping to that intimate tone she knew too well. But if you testify, if you tell them he threatened you, forced you into this, I can make all of this go away. The investigation, the charges. His eyes locked on hers. We can go back to how things were. I'll forgive you for everything, I promise. The trap was perfect. Testify against Min-jun, and she'd be sentencing the man who'd saved her to federal prison. Refuse. And Marcus had enough manufactured evidence to bring them both down. The restaurant full of witnesses meant Min-jun couldn't simply make Marcus disappear. Any violence now would only confirm the federal case against him. Jasmine's hands shook. 2 years ago, she would have crumbled. 2 months ago, she would have hidden. But something had changed. Someone had changed her. No, she said quietly. Marcus's mask slipped. What? I said no, louder this time. And I think we need to talk about what really happened 2 years ago, Detective Webb. Finding her voice, the small recording device Min-jun had given her 3 days ago pressed against her ribs beneath her uniform shirt. Just in case, he'd said, his dark eyes serious. If Marcus makes a move, make him talk, let him bury himself. Now, standing in the Seoul Lounge with federal agents and a restaurant full of witnesses, Jasmine understood why. You want the truth? She said, her voice steadier than she'd expected. Let's talk about the truth, Detective Webb. Marcus's expression flickered confusion, then warning. Jasmine, don't. 2 years ago, you isolated me from my family and friends. You used your access to police databases to track my movements, monitor my phone calls, and control every aspect of my life. She spoke clearly, projecting her voice the way she'd learned during her brief theater elective in college. Every word was being recorded. Every word mattered. The federal agents exchanged glances. Marcus's face had gone pale. You quit my culinary program without my permission, Jasmine continued. You assaulted me repeatedly over 18 months. When I tried to leave, you used your badge to convince everyone I was unstable. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. And 3 weeks ago, you nearly killed me in my own apartment. That's a lie. Marcus lunged toward her, professional mask shattering. You lying bitch. I gave you everything. His hand closed around her wrist, grip bruising, exactly the way it had 100 times before. But this time, there were cameras, witnesses, federal agents stepping forward, the senior agent's hand moving to his weapon. Marcus realized his mistake too late. He released her, but the damage was done. Every eye in the restaurant had seen Detective Marcus Webb assault a woman in front of law enforcement. Sir, I'm going to need you to step back, The federal agent's voice was cold, professional. That's when the restaurant's manager appeared with a tablet, handing it to the senior agent. "Sir, you should see this. Mr. Kang's attorney had it delivered an hour ago." The agent's expression changed as he scrolled through the files. Financial records showing Marcus's gambling debts, internal affairs complaints that had mysteriously disappeared, testimonies from 3 other women who'd filed reports against him, reports that never made it past his precinct. Security footage from Jasmine's old apartment building showing Marcus breaking down her door. Minjun hadn't just prepared Jasmine. He'd prepared a case. But the evidence that mattered most was what Jasmine had just provided. Her voice, clear and unbroken, speaking truth in front of witnesses who couldn't be silenced or intimidated. Marcus was handcuffed 30 seconds later. As they led him out, he looked at Jasmine one final time, not with rage, but with disbelief. He'd never imagined she'd find the strength to fight back. He'd underestimated the woman he'd spent 2 years trying to break. Jasmine watched him go, her wrist throbbing where he'd grabbed her, and felt something shift in her chest. Not relief. Not yet, but something close to it. Freedom. She hadn't needed Minjun to save her this time. She'd saved herself. No longer hiding. The trial lasted 3 weeks, and Jasmine didn't hide once. She sat in the witness box with her spine straight, wearing a navy dress Keisha had helped her pick out, and spoke every truth she'd kept silent for 2 years. The defense attorney tried to shake her, implying she was lying, suggesting she'd wanted the relationship, insinuating she was vindictive. Jasmine met every question with calm clarity. "Did Detective Webb ever assault you?" "Yes, multiple times over 18 months. "And why didn't you report it?" "Because he told me no one would believe me over a decorated police officer." He was right until he wasn't. Marcus was convicted on 7 counts: assault, stalking, abuse of power, evidence tampering, and 3 counts of witness intimidation. 15 years minimum. The courtroom had erupted. Jasmine had simply closed her eyes and exhaled. The healing came slower than the conviction. Therapy twice a week with Dr. Chen, unpacking trauma that had roots deeper than Marcus. Reconnecting with Keisha over tearful lunches, where Jasmine apologized for disappearing, and Keisha refused to accept it. "You survived," her best friend had said fiercely. "That's all that matters." Dinner with her mother, her aunt, her cousins rebuilding bridges Marcus had burned. And culinary school. Minjun had handed her the enrollment papers one evening, along with a check for the full tuition. "It's not syndicate money," he'd assured her. "Legitimate business investments. Clean." Their relationship had shifted somewhere between the trial and her graduation. No longer protector and protected. No longer savior and rescued. Just 2 people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to stay when the light came. "I love you," Minjun had said one night, the words careful and deliberate. "Not because you needed saving, because of who you are when you're free." "I love you too," Jasmine had whispered back, "not despite what you are, because you saw who I could become." The restaurant opened on a Tuesday in spring. Small, intimate 20 seats, an open kitchen, a menu that blended Southern soul food with Korean influences. She'd named it Neka, after her grandmother. Minjun had stayed in the background, his financial backing invisible, his presence supportive but never controlling. Opening night was perfect chaos, every table full, the kitchen humming, Jasmine in her element creating something beautiful from nothing. She was plating the final dessert when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "He's at my door. I don't know what to do. Please. I'm so scared." An address followed. A woman she'd never met, desperate and alone, sending a plea into the void, hoping anyone would answer. Jasmine looked up. Minjun stood in the kitchen doorway, having seen the message over her shoulder. Their eyes met. He nodded once. She typed back, "Send me your location. Help is coming." Then she made a call not to Minjun's people, but to a network she'd been quietly building. Women who'd survived, women who helped others escape. She'd become someone who saved others. And standing in her kitchen, phone in hand, scars healed but not forgotten, Jasmine Taylor was finally free, finally powerful, finally whole. No longer hiding. Never again.